Did WWE botch Keith Lee? I'm Ollie Davis. This is Luke Owen. Welcome to the WrestleTalk review podcast of last night's episode of Raw, where, as was advertised on SummerSlam, we got the debut of Keith Lee, the guy who lost the NXT Championship on Saturday night at NXT TakeOver XXX to Karrion Kross. Seems like he was just a bit of a transitional champion, really. Only had the belt for just over a month, but now he's on Raw. It's after SummerSlam. It's like the start of a new season for WWE. And how did Keith Lee debut? He debuted in a segment with Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre. He was put in right at the top, in my opinion. And I've got a low bar for NXT call-ups. We all should have a low bar for NXT call-ups. Yes, his name wasn't changed. That was just muscle memory for when I talk about NXT call-ups.
Oh, yeah.
His music was changed. His ring attire was changed. And that might have... I think people are focusing on that too much. Because I saw it happen. I was like, I watched the episode of Raw, and I was so happy for Keith Lee. I was really excited for him, and it wasn't a perfect call-up, but very, very few are when it's WWE. This was him, like I said, feud with Randy Orton, getting a pay-per-view match at Sunday with Randy Orton. He's in the mix of the WWE Championship picture, in my opinion, right now. Commentary put him over like $1 million. This fills me with optimism. And I get online, and the general reaction and the reaction on my Raw review that went up at 1:00 is all stuff like Keith Lee was buried.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Botched already. I was quite stunned by it, because I watched it this morning, and I was like, oh God, they changed this music. That music's very generic and very, very rubbish. Oh no, he's not wearing like his Keith Lee gear either, because I guess we'll get into the gear in a minute and the reason as to why I think that they have changed it. But at the end of it, I was like, man, Keith Lee is in the mix with Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre at the moment. This is what we've been asking for from NXT call-ups since Kevin Owens, really. Like, I don't think they have done a really successful NXT call-up to this degree, like since Owens, like when you debut someone and instantly make them feel like a star. Because Andrade didn't feel like a star when he came up. Rude didn't feel like a star. Ricochet hasn't felt like a star.
Drew McIntyre.
He was
Dolph Ziggler's second.
And when he wasn't Dolph Ziggler second, he was just Baron Corbin second or Braun Strowman's second. Like, he was not a star when he came up to the main roster. Keith Lee's been brought up, and they're like, and he's now feuding with Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre. It's like, what? A WWE champion Drew McIntyre. And if you saw the SummerSlam stream that we did yesterday, I did have a very cynical approach that he was going to come out and just do a squash match, and we'll see those for the next 3 weeks. Then he'll take some time off, just like the Viking Raiders. Then he'll come back and he'll do another 3 weeks, this, that, and the other. I had incredibly low expectations for this. And while it was not perfect, it was far from perfect, because we can say a lot about the match that he had as well. There's so much upside to this that I think it's impossible to say that Keith Lee was buried on this show. I think it is actually impossible to say that they botched it. It's not perfect, but to say that he was buried is ludicrous to me.
Yeah, I think buried gets thrown around a lot as a bit of hyperbole. It's kind of like you don't really know how you feel yet, but it wasn't exactly as you had it pictured. Therefore, your favorite has been buried, or it's been botched. And you know what, we do that sometimes too, because we get so invested in things. It comes from a place of passion. We're not like saying that, like, sort of devaluing people's opinion who think this. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the chat as well. But it's just like, and maybe our big fault is that our expectations are so low with this sort of stuff. Like you said, WWE haven't done a good one since Kevin Owens. When was that? 2016, 2015?
The other one I suppose you could make the argument for is Balor, because they did, they strapped the title to him as soon as he came up, basically. So he's probably the other one that you could say.
Yeah, initially that was correct. I would say we don't know how this is going to unfold, because this was a good first week. It wasn't a perfect first week, but it was a good first week. Where he's at after Sunday in particular, because if he loses to Orton at Payback, and it's not a killer angle as why, there's that's troubling there. But let's see where we're at after 3 weeks before we say buried. This isn't a Viking experience. I still stand by calling the Viking Raiders the Viking experience. Really hindered them from the get-go. What happened after that, however, was just booking and management's portrayal. And they changed the name as well. Sometimes it's just change rather than something bad. So jury's out, but definitely on this first outing, I consider this that Keith Lee's massively over.
And I mean, it's hard to say if we can say that he's over because there's no, I mean, they're piping in the crowd reaction. So the fake noise told me that he's over, but I suppose we have no real way of knowing. But I just think that for me, watching this show, I thought, okay, he's got this match with Randy Orton this weekend. I can see it going one of two ways. I'll talk about this in the prediction show that we've got coming out later today. I can see it going one of two ways. He loses to Randy Orton via Drew McIntyre distraction or what have you, or Drew McIntyre causes a DQ. Either way, my big prediction is that the Clash of Champions main event, for at least the WWE Championship picture, is a triple threat of Drew, Randy, and Keith. Bearing in mind that Keith's promo after Drew was taken off was like, look, he's my friend. We're really good friends. They very much peppered that throughout the show. It's like, it's Drew's good friend, Keith Lee. But he's like, he's my friend, but I don't need him interfering in my matches, which beautifully sets up something to happen at Payback, where Drew can come out still pissed, full of piss and vinegar at Randy Orton for sending him to a local medical facility, and that interference causes Keith to take a loss. I don't as long as there's some protection around Keith Lee taking a loss against Randy Orton, I don't think that's a bad move either, especially if you can build off the back of it with something else. Keith looked great in the sort of 5-minute match he had with Randy, because Randy was bumping all over the show for him.
Well, let's go through what actually happened. Drew McIntyre came out at the start of the show, cut a promo about how he beat the greatest wrestler in the world, right? That makes him the greatest wrestler. Offered Orton a rematch out of pity or whatever. And then he walks up, he gets attacked by Randy Orton. Randy Orton hits a couple, 2 punts, go to ab break, come back, and Drew's stumbling around. So the punt has been so devalued. If you want to talk about a burial recently, HBK last week and Drew here, the punt, one should be enough to take you out. But we got 3 punts on this show, which was enough to send Drew to hospital. And of course, the Shawn Michaels stuff last week. So Orton comes out later on to explain this. And you've been having video packages hyping Keith Lee's debut before this and the commentary talking about it, which makes it feel like a big deal. This isn't just something that was thrown in there. And Keith Lee interrupts Randy Orton. And I was like, as soon as Keith Lee came out, because I didn't expect it. I was expecting just, here is the NXT call-up. Here is the token match of squash. Enjoy, Thunderdome. And it was him coming right out. The top heel in the company. I guess Roman Reigns is the top heel in the company. But Randy Orton is the top heel in the company. And arguably, because of a very limited roster, the company's biggest mainstream star.
Mm-hmm.
And we criticize WWE, that mentality that they got the rub, right? Doesn't matter, they lost, they got the rub. You look at this on paper, Keith Lee did in fact come in and lose his first match to Randy Orton in 5 minutes on an episode of Raw. But stuff on paper is not how it unfolds in practice. Like Luke said, they have a match later on, which, in a better world would have been next week, because that was something I was really excited about. I think that would have felt better if you hold it off. But they've got to build towards Payback.
Can I stop you there? Sorry. Will you guys stop saying that Roman is a heel? It makes you look very silly.
Oh, yes, that was definitely serious when I said that. And they have this match, 5-minute match. Commentary are putting over Keith. And like you said, Randy's putting over Keith. There's a spot where Keith Lee catches Randy Orton's punch and just sort of crushes it in front of him. And Randy's selling it like, oh my God. This is meant to be one of the most protected guys in the company.
Yeah.
Having a punch caught. That's a huge deal.
And you've got the commentary like falling over themselves to put him over and just be like, have you ever seen anyone this strong? Have you ever seen this? Samoa Joe was doing everything possible. He like when they says like, you know, he was coming out to the ring, they're like, oh, he's one of the most athletic men for his size. And Samoa Joe's like, no, not just for his size. He's one of the most athletic men, period. He like the commentary were doing so much to put this guy over.
Yeah. And look, so this is where we sort of, I guess the criticisms can come into. He's got different music. That's just very annoying because his music in NXT was great. He was singing it or rapping it rather, which, you know, makes it a really cool way to get over his character immediately. That's what entrance music's meant to do. That's a definite negative. His ring attire is different. Like on impulse, I think it's bad because he's looking NXT, just the trunks. He's got such a unique look. And what's happened here is, I think we can all realize, unless you're a comedy character, if you don't have the right in air quotes physique that Vince McMahon wants to put on TV, which is the Drew McIntyre physique, then you will get covered up. So this is, you know, this is essentially a bit of fat shaming, right?
It's 100%, yeah.
So Keith Lee has got baggy gym shorts on. You lose the shape of those impressive muscular thighs. Look at the pistons. If Taz was there, he'd be going crazy for those pistons. And then on top of that, which I think it looks a bit rubbish, is this sleeveless vest.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, really. It's like there's, and people might be saying that you're reading too much into this, but there is a track record of this, of Vince does not like Husky Harris. The Huskers the Pig Boy as a character in the Firefly Funhouse is based around the fact that Vince McMahon thought that Bray Wyatt was too fat to be on TV, basically, and was told to go and lose weight.
The WWE via Vince McMahon did a fat shaming storyline for Mickey James.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Bray Wyatt. Big Damo, when he came up as part of Sanity, the first thing they did was put a top on him because Vince doesn't like that body type. Roman Reigns, there's a reason why Roman Reigns wears a vest and he wears the flak jacket. It's because he doesn't have a six-pack. And because Vince wants him to be the top guy, can't have that on show. You can't have like you watch a lot of Roman's early matches. He is so self-conscious about the way that he looks. He's constantly tucking his vest into his pants so that it doesn't come up and you can see his little tum-tum. It's and that's clearly a Vinceism, that he doesn't want to see the fact that you don't have a six-pack. I can't put you out on TV. And it's been that way for a long, long time. And who's the only fat guy that they have on TV? Otis. And what does he do?
Body.
He runs around and he rubs his belly and he dances around. He's a complete comedy goofball. So it is awful fat shaming. And it's such a shame because, as you said, Keith Lee's got such a unique look about him. And you couple that with the entrance music as well, which sets him apart from everyone else because it's not this generic song. It's a song that he's written. It's a song that he's performed. It's a song that he's put together, and it sounds wicked and it gets over his personality. So they took that out and just like chugga 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 chugga. It sounds like, you know, SmackDown 2 menu music. It's really stupidly bad.
So when we worked at Indie Mania and a few other indie shows, sometimes wrestlers turn up and they haven't brought their entrance music. Do you think this is what happened? He just left it at home. He didn't bring the pen drive, and we're like, God, I'll use something from the archive then. How's rock music number 3?
Yeah, that's pretty much what this track is called.
Yeah, it's usually like, it's not called rock music number 3. It's Rock and Rager number 3. The way those archives work.
Get excited, volume 4.
And we're not, trust me, we're not, when we say that, you know, overall, I think Keith Lee's debut was a big win. We're not belittling the importance of entrance music and ring attire to the overall presentation of a wrestler. It enhances them so much, but it's not the be all and end all. People can get over in spite of those things. If they have a bad story, however, no one is going to get over just because they've got a great entrance music. Look at Bobby Roode. He didn't have the story. He always had that entrance, didn't have the story. So it's the story and the character work that's the most important, and that's why I think this works. There is another criticism that's come out, and that is Keith Lee lost. So they have this 5-minute match. Randy Orton sells for him, but Randy Orton gets on top. He's gearing up for the RKO, and Drew McIntyre runs in and causes the DQ. So Keith loses by DQ, mind you. I think that's fine. This was a angle show. This wasn't a wrestling show. They've got a pay-per-view on Sunday, which, is stupid and nonsensical, but this is the corner they've booked themselves into. So they needed to set up this match. And this was a good way to save Orton and Keith Lee for pay-per-view, which they should be doing. That's the right move.
Yeah,
the only thing I would have changed, and it develops what you touched on earlier about Keith Lee being annoyed that Drew, his mate, has gotten involved here and cost him a victory. His first victory. He should be annoyed about that. Randy Orton's run off. Drew McIntyre's in the ring like, ooh, my head. And there is no Keith Lee to be seen. He's Thanos'd away. And that's such a mistake. Yeah. Such a mistake. At least have him in there. But what would have been best, Drew turns around and Keith Lee's standing there. And Keith Lee's like, Drew. He's wonderful way. And he's, maybe Drew's got the title. And Keith looks at the title. And he's like, and it's sort of unspoken. Nice to see you, bud. I'm glad you're okay. You're my friend, but don't do that again. Oh, by the way, I want that.
Yeah, and you couple that with the promo that he cuts later on when Drew's taken off to the local medical facility. I think that actually would have put a really neat bow on the story that I think they are trying to tell. Bear in mind, I am maybe I'm reading too much between the lines, but I think this is the story that they're telling. And I think that's actually it would have been a really nice touch, because it did suck that, got the DQ and then the focus was just taken away from him and just moved over to this pre-existing feud, and they battled and Lee just disappeared. I don't think it also helped as well that it was the exact same DQ we got in the Bayley Baszler match. Like, it's literally the exact same disqualification, like spot and all. So I don't think that helped either. And I think that's why a lot of people are diving onto this. Keith Lee was botched. Keith Lee was buried, this, that, and the other. Because I've seen some people be like, oh man, like they've changed his character. But like, have they though? Like, he came out and he cut a Keith Lee promo. He went out there and he wrestled a Keith Lee match. It's just the music and the gear doesn't work. I don't think it's the best presentation of Impossible. And that's it. Like, it's not the worst presentation, but it's not the best presentation of Keith Lee. And yeah, but aside from that, like I just think this is a net positive, which is that we've got an NXT call-up that wasn't doing squash matches, that was put into a storyline and is facing Randy freaking Orton at the pay-per-view. Like, I'm taking that as a net positive, mate.
You touched on something there that we haven't covered, actually. Keith Lee's promos. I just love hearing him talk. Like, he's one of those people who could do a WWE script, and the way he talks, it's so stylized anyway.
Apex Predator.
Apex Predator. Like, it sends shivers down my spine. Thank you, Ollie. Support Luke. So it's just like, I just like hearing him speak. It's unlike any other way, and that's it. Like, he's so unique that hopefully he isn't just a supporting character, an Alistair Black, an Humberto Carrillo.
That's
in
exactly
the Drew McIntyre Randy Orton feud, because they didn't want to do the rematch so soon. But that's what happens later on, because this story, this was the main story of the episode as well. The post SummerSlam show was Keith Lee's story, which is again something that's going unnoticed, I think. And Drew's attacked backstage by a third punt. Third one's a charm. He's sent to a local medical facility, and that's where Keith Lee says, "I'm gonna, get my revenge on, or sort of avenge Drew there." And the match was made: Randy Orton versus Keith Lee for Payback. Huge vote of confidence by the company in him.
Absolutely. And so Keith Lee's main roster appearances thus far have been going down to the final two with Roman Reigns at Survivor Series, going toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, and now going into a feud with Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre over the WWE Championship. Like, that seems to me like a bit of a vote of confidence, to be honest. Like, and it's one of those things where you're like, oh, so you do know how to debut NXT stars. Like, you do know how it's done.
It's interesting, though, how, they did the same thing with Shayna. Dominated Survivor Series, dominated Rumble, dominated Elimination Chamber. But all the while, it didn't feel like the company was behind her. So I was always a bit like trepidatious over getting invested in her. But Keith Lee's little spots, like you said, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, I feel like the company are into him. But, this clip might be played back to me in 3 weeks' time. I'm very aware of that when he is just, I don't know, fighting MVP, because that's usually where any diverse wrestlers go, is the United States Championship.
Yeah. So I think, but broad strokes, I don't like the new ring gear. And I don't like the new ring gear for two reasons. The reasons for which are twofold. I don't think it looks as good as his trunks. And B, it's very much just a Vince McMahonism that I am not on board with. And his generic entrance music just needs to go back to his old theme.